Hey everyone, hi, welcome. Today is December 26th, so for everybody who celebrates Christmas, Merry Christmas. A belated and wonderful Merry Christmas to you all. So what am I doing today? Today I decided to, actually I've done this in the last couple of weeks, probably the whole month of December. I've been looking back at all of the books I've read and trying to decipher or determine themes that have emerged through my reading and how I can kind of change myself, my identity as a reader, my identity as Shelley Swearingen. And so I thought this would be a really good reflective video to look back at everything that I've read. I'm not going to talk about everything that I've read, but the main lessons that I've learned through my reading this year. That's what this video is about. I'm going to have everything blocked into chapters in this video, so I strongly encourage you to look at the chapters, watch the video all the way through, and then go back to the chapters that intrigued you most. But the chapters will help you kind of understand the structure that I'm going with. But mostly these are a handful of lessons that I've learned through my reading this year. Interestingly, the major theme in my reading was that I read about female protagonists, so female-centered stories written by women. That seemed to be just a huge theme throughout my reading. I read about 21 or 22 of these books, female-written stories with female protagonists. And there were a lot that stood out. There was a book called Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, that I read, I think in March or April of this year. And it was all about the misogyny that women experience in their roles as women in living in Korea. And the book really sparked the feminist movement in Korea, the more modern feminist movement in Korea, and rightfully so, because the story was so good. It was about a woman who has had basically a psychotic breakdown, and through the story, which is very, very short, a quick read, you understand, the reader gets a better understanding of why she had this breakdown, and a lot of it was due to the societal expectations and cultural norms that Korea places on women, which I thought was incredibly fascinating. The reason why I bring this up is because after I read Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, I followed that a few months later by reading Jane Austen, and I think that I definitely appreciated Jane Austen a lot more having read the book Kim Jiyoung, born 1982. So I wanted to mention that book in particular, but the big theme that I've read this year was female-centered stories written by females. I also wanted to say that a change has definitely come about. It's one that I've talked about a little bit with people on BookTube, but I don't think I've said it in a video before. But for a really long time, I believed that, or I thought that the role of a woman was that she was to get married and start a family. And I knew that this wasn't for every person, every female on this planet, but it's the narrative that I am most familiar with. And so it was hard to imagine a different way of life that somebody, a woman, would want for herself, because I was so embedded in that narrative. And starting with the Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, starting with that book, Jane Austen, and further readings, I've really able to shape the different paths that women can take, have taken, and aspire to take in their lives. And jokingly, much to my husband's chagrin, I said that after he dies, I don't think that, if I outlive him, I don't think I'm going to get married again. But not because we have a bad marriage, but that now I can see a different path, a path where a life of singlehood is one of great value. I wanted to put that out there as a lesson that I've continued to think about. So the second thing, is Jane Austen is not boring. Jane Austen is not boring. I will admit to you all that for a long time, for most of my adult life, I've carried around the belief that Jane Austen is kind of boring, that she's a bit dull. And then I met a thing called Jane Austen July, and I decided to participate in full force with Jane Austen July, and I read 2 Jane Austen pieces, Persuasion and Lady Susan, and then I read a biography about Jane Austen, Claire Tomalin's Jane Austen, A Life. And through reading this nonfiction work about Jane Austen and diving more into Jane Austen's writings, I've realized and come to greatly appreciate how ahead of her time Jane Austen is, how clever and witty and delightful she is, and she's really become somewhat of a girl crush or a hero for me because she chose her writing life over anything else. And during this time when Jane Austen lived, it was, you know, the late 1700s and the early 1800s. It was of a woman's duty to get married because otherwise she would be the financial burden of her parents for her entire life. That was kind of the underlining message for an unmarried woman during this time period. And Jane Austen, though she was proposed to twice, continued to live her life of singledom. And there was just something really empowering to me about that and really inspiring, along with the writings that I was able to explore from her. So Lady Susan was hilarious, and Persuasion was shockingly moving. There is a scene near the end, I won't spoil it, that just really got in and amongst me when I read Persuasion, and I still think about that moment today. Okay, moving on from my sort of feminist revolution, or I don't know what you want to call that. But let's talk about the most surprising genre. I do have a list. Let's talk about the most surprising groupings of books. I found the ancient Greeks very surprising. I read Aristophanes, Lysistrata. That was surprisingly funny. I also read Longus's Daphne and Chloe, surprisingly romantic and innocently sweet in many ways. And then the Iliad. I met my match with this. I've said that before. I went in with it thinking, oh, you know, these 2 books were pretty easy. I think I'll get through this just fine. And no, it was quite difficult in some areas. I did finish this just yesterday. Merry Christmas to me. And I loved it. My friend Elizabeth mentioned how structurally, I'll leave Elizabeth's channel link down below, but structurally this book is phenomenal, and I cannot help but agree with her. It's moving and touches on things like grief and public mourning that really just surprisingly moved me. And I didn't think that it would get in and amongst me, the Iliad, and yet it did. So the most surprising genre, if you want to call it a genre, was the ancient Greeks. Okay, now kind of swinging over to something a bit different. I try and think about experiences that I've learned about. So in 2020, I learned a lot about the African American experience living in the United States through the years. I read a lot of African American or Black centric literature last year, especially talking about their experience living in the United States. This year I noticed that through my mood reading, I didn't set out to learn about this, but I learned quite a bit about sexual assault and the experience of living through that trauma and the aftermath of it all. There were 2 books in particular that really spoke about this experience, and it was Hunger by Roxane Gay and Know My Name by Chanel Miller. Both women talk about being assaulted really, really horrible assaults, and then the aftermath of both of those assaults. Chanel Miller's book in particular opens with the aftermath of her assault and her time in the hospital, living through the details of a rape kit, which was really interesting to read about, because I didn't know what went into that. And so I want to say, like, the shoes that I walked in that were the most impactful to me, that grew my empathy in some way, was that of an assault survivor, an assault victim, however you want to say it. But I feel like I learned quite a bit about that experience, and I'm able to empathize with those who have gone through the experience and lived through this. My empathy has just grown for sexual assault survivors, or sexual assault victims, however you want to name it. And I thought that was a really valuable lesson for me to learn. Now, interestingly, I mentioned 2 memoirs. I read 8 or 9 memoirs this year, and actually the genre that worked the least for me, the one that was the most hit and miss, was memoirs. I think my problem with memoirs is that I'm looking for a little more academia in them. I'm looking for a bit more research, a little bit more of the incorporation of research, and I want to know I want topics, whatever the topic that the writer is going down, I want them to research it a bit more and then present the research to me. I think that's just a me thing. I think that I need to kind of rethink about my memoirs and the way that I approach picking them, because it really was the genre that was the most hit and miss for me. So I'm gonna do some reflecting and figure out maybe a different way I can approach my memoir picking. Yeah. Okay, now to something quite a lot lighter. So, the salve for the soul. The books that for me were the salve to the soul was that of humor. So I read quite a few humorous books. One of them was W. Somerset Mauham's Up at the Villa. Another one was Lysistrata by Aristophanes. I read the Murderbot series. I read 2 of Martha Wells's Murderbot series. Rather, I listened to them. All of these books have humor really at the forefront of their stories. Oh, one moment. So books with humor at the forefront, really, I saw a lot of value in them. Whereas before, I don't think that I saw as much value in them. I didn't seek them out, or I didn't really see the point of something that was lighthearted and humorous, and I don't feel that way at all now. I actually seek out those little brain breaks. I seek out something that's a little bit funny, or that is supposed to be entertaining in a humorous kind of way, and I've really appreciated that this year. I've really appreciated the small breaks that these books have given me, and I have definitely learned to value humorous or funny books in my reading life in a way that I did not before. One moment. My final reflection is that I have to give up a title. A very specific title that I used to hold on to, and you've seen me say it in my videos before. I have always said, I'm not a series reader. I don't read series. I can't say that anymore. In the last couple months of the year, I read Becky Chambers' series, the Wayfairer series, were the first 2 books in that. I read Martha Wells's first 2 books in the Murderbot series. I'm reading the Odyssey next month as a follow-up to Homer's Iliad. I also read the first 2 books in Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall series, or Thomas Cromwell series, and I'm finishing out the series with my reading group in January and February. So I have always kind of clung to this idea that I'm not a series reader, because I haven't been in the last several years, and I cannot say that anymore, much to my delight, because I found series that I really, really love. But yeah, that's it. I would encourage any one of you that if you make videos, or if you are an avid reader or a reader of any kind, what did you learn from your reading this year? These were some that I just noticed when I was looking through all of the books that I've read, that there were little themes, and these were the themes that I picked up on, and that I wanted to come on here and really solidify this reflection by talking about it. And so I thank you all for that. But mostly I want to know, was there any themes that came out in your reading and your learning? How have you grown as a reader? I want to know. I'm just so curious. But that's it for me. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season and enjoy the new year, New Year's Day coming up and New Year's Eve. And that's it for me. So thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.